this is your host, Julia Napini. I am a clinical and forensic social worker who owns a counseling practice and a consulting business. In this show, we discuss the challenges of being successful in business while maintaining your integrity and staying true to yourself. Join me while I interview other professionals and share insights from life and experience. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Compassionate Climb podcast. Our guest today told me that I needed to buckle up because we were in for a great episode. So that is the kind of energy we are looking for today. We have Zac Stucki with us today, and I would love if you would introduce yourself. Welcome.
Hi, Julia. It's great to be here. What do you want to know?
So tell us a little bit about your company, how long you've been doing it, and what you do.
Okay. Well, I am a customer-centric operations expert. And what that means is that I work with businesses to understand the real reasons why their customers are buying from them so that they can design their business strategy and their operations around that. And when they do that, they fix quality, profitability, and scaling problems. Take a lot of weight off the owner's shoulders as well.
Sounds great. So I definitely want to hear more. So how did you get here? What led you to start this company and to structure it the way you do? What were you doing before all this?
Okay. Before I was doing this, I was working for a lot of different startups. I've always had a passion for small business. It's always been something that I've really loved. And, I had worked with some other businesses before and was working with this one business. It was a medical practice. And, I created a plan for them that would have added double digits to their profitability, just a huge boost. And I realized, maybe I should be doing this.
You're onto something here.
Yeah. And, just kind of felt very strongly that was the path that God wanted me to take. And so that's the path that I took.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So tell me about some early challenges for you. When you say small business and that you have a passion for it, I don't know about you, but I obviously anticipated some of the process, but we can't really anticipate everything. What was it like for you to get up and going?
Lots of imposter syndrome. There was also, the thing that's tricky for me was also like building that credibility, building that authority.
Yes.
And just knowing how and where to talk to people. Finding a target audience and like picking that can be really difficult as well. Mm-hmm. And coming to terms when you fail. Failure's a really big part of entrepreneurship, in case you didn't know. Spoiler alert, listeners. But it's a really, really big part of entrepreneurship, and you've got to have a thick skin. Mm-hmm. And so that was something that took me a while to grow, was disconnecting the no that someone said from my actual value as an entrepreneur and what I brought to people. And it actually took me quite a while to work through that. But I am happy to say that I am a recovering perfectionist and a recovering, I don't know how to, like a meaningfulness, I guess, like giving meaning to things that really don't mean anything.
Well, so despite all of that, you persevered, you stayed on the path. And so to me, that tells me you had a very clear why or purpose, I would assume. So what was the driving force behind your perseverance?
That's a great question. I think for me, I've thought about this for a while because we'll get into this a little bit later, but I'm going to start a fight here a little bit, so bear with me. But I'm not like a huge fan of Simon Sinek and his start with why stuff. Mm-hmm. But I've thought about like, what is my mission? What is my mission? And so it finally dawned on me. Do you know what a conduit is? So a conduit, for the listeners, a conduit it's basically a way to get something from some place to another place. In electrical engineering, it gets power from one place to another place. Mm-hmm. So I feel like my mission is to be a conduit for entrepreneurs.
Okay.
To help them get the knowledge and the expertise and the wisdom that they need to be able to grow their business and grow their impact for their customers without growing the weight on their shoulders and just totally destroying their lives. Because most entrepreneurs, they build a business into a prison and they don't even know it.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I have to unpack that a little bit. So what do you see as the difference between mission and your why?
Okay, so this goes back to, I think, the way that people use the why,
Okay.
right? So an underlying why is often like internally focused, I guess. It's like,
Okay.
this is what I'm here to do, and I'm going to go and do it, and I, right? But like a mission is outwardly directed. I'm here to serve you. I'm here to do this thing. Right? And I know that there's like some nuance there. I get it.
Sure.
But the other thing that I don't like about Simon Sinek's Golden Circle is he says people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And I just think he's mistaken. Because do a thought experiment here with me, Julia. When was the last time you bought a toaster?
Can't remember the last time.
Okay. But you have bought a toaster?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When you bought that toaster, were you looking at the vision, mission, and value statement of that company?
No.
No.
It was going to meet a need.
Right. Most people don't. There's another Harvard business professor. His name's Clayton Christensen, and he says people don't buy a product or service. They hire it to help them make progress in their life.
The one difference I would say, though, is a product versus... Maybe it has to do with the industry that I'm in. And I'm assuming the industry that you're in. It's a lot less product driven. As a therapist, we are the product. As a consultant, we are the one that's kind of providing that specialty and information and guidance. So I don't know if you feel like it's any different depending on the type of work, or you still feel across the board it's more about mission.
So that's a really good question and a really insightful question, and here's why. Because the guy who came up with this idea of, it's called jobs theory or jobs to be done theory. And the guy who came up with this, he said, a job isn't just a functional thing. It's not just I want toast. A job is also social and emotional. And so it's like, I'll give you an example. People who buy a Bugatti Veyron, which is one of the most expensive cars in the world, can go, I think, over 300 miles an hour. The likelihood that they're going to take that over 300 miles an hour at any time in their life is incredibly small. They're buying that car so that people will look at that guy and say, whoa, that dude's awesome. He's got a Bugatti. Like, like, there's these other aspects that weigh into the job as well.
Sure.
But if you just focus on one side of it over another, you get this skewed vision of what you're actually supposed to be doing. And I think that that's a disservice that this concept of the golden circle and start with why has created, is this sort of disconnection between what I do and why I do it. And the other thing is, again, it's very internally focused, whereas customers don't care what you do or why you're doing it if you can't help them make progress in their life. So they're focused on, what is the progress you're helping me make?
That's a great point. I really appreciate the conversation, and I love how you're not just adopting what many people have chosen to follow, and you've put a little bit more of a spin on it, and obviously been introspective and figured out what works best for you, and what you're saying makes a lot of sense. So how have you taken this idea of your mission and what's driving you, and then how do you put that into practice with the people that you serve to solve their profitability, quality, and scaling problems? So somebody comes to you and they're struggling. How do they find you and know that you're the right one for them? And then how does the process work?
Yeah, so, this all started for me back in 2012. I had an idea for an app. And you have to remember, this is before Instacart or DoorDash or anything like that. And the idea was, we'll go to grocery stores and we'll map out their floor plan, and then we'll basically give the shoppers a map that will get them to everything on their shopping list as quickly as possible. And it was a total flop. It was like a total flop. When I actually presented this to grocery stores, they were like, you do realize we want people to get stuck in our stores, because if they do, they will buy more of our stuff. Like, that's the whole point of the layout. And I like it took me a long time to really think through this and think about, like, okay, so why didn't that work? It was a great idea, and people kept telling me that's a great idea. And I realized that there's a difference between the customer and the user. And so that's what kind of led me to this jobs theory, and what led me to this mission of helping people get connected with that knowledge, that expertise, that wisdom that they need to really grow and scale their business. So, in terms of application, what this looks like is helping you understand, like, who are the clients that you're really best suited to serve. Now, a lot of people who do work like this, they'll say, it's almost like throw a dart at a board, like put a bunch of pictures up and just throw a dart at a board and choose one. But that's horrible advice, because choosing your target client should be based on who you can have the most impact serving, and also who you can have the most profit serving. And so that's what I help my clients do first, right off the bat, is we're going to do a client profitability analysis. We're going to look at who your clients are, and we're going to say, these are the types of clients where you can have the most impact for the least amount of work, which means that your profit is highest. After we do that, then we're going to say, okay, what is the job that they're hiring you to do? What's the progress that they're really trying to make in their life? And we're doing, like, so this is different than traditional customer or market research, because traditional market research is, okay, we're going to send out a 10-question survey, and we're arrogant enough to believe that we can get everything we need to know about our client in 10 questions that they type in on a form, and most likely will do 1 to 2 sentence answers in each box. Like, that's ludicrous. That's laughable. This is, you're having 60-minute conversations, and you're learning to empathize with your client. You're learning to connect with your client. You're learning to understand. They had a really awful day one day where they had this problem that they just couldn't overcome, and it was really painful for them, to the point where they said, something's got to change. And you have to take them to that moment so that you can understand what that situation was. And then you have to say, okay, so now that you've purchased, where were you trying to go? What did you want to create? Because the next part of what I help my customers do is that your client is here. They have this struggling moment. Then they want to go here. This is their promised land, right? That's where the problem is solved. There's a bridge that needs to get built between these two. That's the job.
Yeah.
And if you want to build loyal clients and scale your business sustainably, you have to build your business around that job. You have to understand that's the progress. So how do I help them do that better and more profitably than anyone else on the market?
So I can envision this, like, logistically makes so much sense, but I can see this being a tough sell. You talked about the credibility piece and working through that in the beginning. Have you found it challenging to get people to buy into the fact that this is something that's worth their investment to hire you to work on this for themselves?
So the hardest part with the credibility is helping people see that they don't actually know the job that their customer is hiring them to do. Because 90% of the time, they confuse their product or service or their offer stack with what the job is that their customer is actually hiring them to do. So I'll give you an example. In the coaching and consulting space, they will get this feedback. It's a multi-million-dollar industry where people will go in and they coach coaches or consult with coaches, and a lot of this revolves around getting exit interviews. And on these exit interviews, they're 30 minutes long, and they ask 10 to 15 questions. And the feedback is always the same. It's we need more accountability, we need more structure, and we need better communication. And so the person who's doing the interviewing, they'll take that down. Okay, more accountability, more feedback, more communication. But they won't follow up with those questions. Those are loaded terms. Those things mean different things to different people. And so it's like, then the coach or consultant, they'll get that back and they'll say, okay, they need more accountability. And then they'll interpret that through their own lens. And so they get this skewed view and they say, well, we're delivering accountability to our clients. Why do they keep turning over? We've got great communication. We're communicating with them all the time. They're communicating back. They're not staying. And so, helping them see that this isn't a simple tweak of going through and just making a little tweak here or a tweak there to their offer stack, but rather deeply empathizing with their client so that they can then deliver on the needs that client actually has. And sometimes that requires them to completely turn over their offering. Sometimes it requires them to recognize that they aren't God's gift to business. Like, a lot of times what I'm finding is that these business owners, like I said earlier in the call, they've built a prison where they bring in their team to support them. And then they say, I can't understand why I can't scale. Well, it's because you're only one person. And if you build a business around needing to clone you, that's never going to happen. But if you build a business around understanding this is the job that my customer is hiring me to do, well, then you can train anyone to do that job. It becomes a simple matter of training them to do this thing and turning it into a process. That's a lot easier to scale. And that's what I help businesses do.
But I can see that component being really challenging for a solopreneur that started their business and they had their own mission or values or vision, and then to try to translate that or convey that accurately to another person. You're saying make it more about the process. So tell me how you would help someone that has started the business, has worn all the hats, has bootstrapped, and then is now expecting, maybe unrealistically, for other people to model that, and that way of shifting it to more of a process than like replicating an individual.
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's why I named this customer-centric operations, right? Because if you're orienting it around you and what you do and the value that you bring, you're never going to be able to do what you need to do to turn it into a process. See, what happens is most of these businesses, they get stuck in this project mindset where every customer who comes through the door, there are a bunch of different processes or projects. Right? You're going to hire to do that project. You're going to basically rebuild the wheel, reinvent the wheel with every single one of these projects that comes through the door. And it's fundamentally non-scalable because it basically becomes this game of throwing bodies at these problems. And a lot of these small business owners, they can't afford that. They can't. And so it's like, how do I scale at that point? How do I grow? I can't. So basically, they have to make this shift from project into process.
Okay.
Processes are scalable. They map across 75 to 90% of all of the work that comes through your door. And you lay it out so it's you do this, then you do this, then you do this, then you wait for that to happen. Once that happens, then you do this, right? When you map that out, you can actually visually map it out, and there's a bunch of different ways to do this. I have my own way of doing it, but you map it out, and then you can hand that map to someone, and you can say, okay, follow this. It's kind of like an SOP, but a little bit more visual, so it's not quite so boring, I guess. But follow this, and if you have any questions, then let's talk. But it gives you a place for training as well. Because if you're doing a project by project basis, how do you know what to train on? Because you don't know who's coming through the door next. You don't know what to train on. If you have a process in place, you know what to train on. And you say, okay, today we're training on this step in the process because I've noticed there's a lot of errors going on here. Or everybody's kind of doing their own thing at this point, so we're going to train on it because this is the way we do it as a team. And it gives you strength operationally. It gives you standardization, and standardization leads to economies of scale, which lead to higher profitability.
So if you ultimately implement this process and you can then train and have your employees follow this, how much room at that point is there for individuality and some autonomy and for them to kind of put their own spin on things? Does that open them up for more of that, or does that kind of extinguish that possibility?
I'm getting excited because this is the good stuff. If you understand the job that your customer is hiring you to do, then 1,000%. Because think about this. If your understanding of your work is, I push this button at this time because that's what the process says, there's no room for ad-libbing, right?
Right.
But if you understand, no, my job is to create this outcome for my customer, and that customer can be internal, it can be just the next step in the process, or it can be external, it can be the person who's paying you money. If you understand what that outcome is, then you can say, if I pushed this button at this time instead of that time, it'd do this for that customer. And that's what they really want. So we're gonna try that. We're gonna do that. And it gives your team the opportunity to really step up and own their expertise, which is what business owners are clamoring for all the time. I need my team to take some weight off of my shoulders.
So you think there's more possibility if you're providing that structure, and then from there, if they're utilizing that kind of empathetic listening and really understanding where the client's coming from, then they can adjust, but they're still hitting the benchmarks.
Absolutely. So let me give you another example. So I have 4 kids under 8, and it's a zoo at our house sometimes.
You never know it from looking at you. You're so calm, cool, and collected.
Well, thank you. My wife found this parenting coach, and one of the things that this parenting coach has said is, when you are teaching your kids and trying to get them to behave, don't say don't and then the thing that you don't want them to do, because it's like there are so many things that it's like, well, okay, what should I do? I don't know what to do. But rather,
and we all inherently want to be successful and get approval, right? So you're saying if we shift the focus, we'll have more success.
Right. What I'm saying is that parenting coach, they say, instead give them something to do.
Okay.
And your team, if you're just telling your team, no, don't do this, or I want you to just specifically do this step in the process without giving them the perspective of the outcome that it's generating for your customer, then how on earth should your team know how to help you? They will have no clue because you've never told them. All you've said is, hey, team, I really need you to step up here and take more weight off my shoulders. What the hell is that supposed to mean?
Right. Makes a lot of sense. Well, it also makes me think about this empathetic listening piece that you're describing, which, being trained as a therapist, I get that wholeheartedly. But I also recognize in the world that we live in the society that we're in, with all of the tasks and responsibilities and things that need to get done, it can be challenging sometimes to really set that time aside to truly focus and be present and listen and hear where your customer is coming from. So do people struggle with that, and how do you help them with that piece? I see the long-term benefits, but I can also see how someone at the outset may think, this is a real big shift for me. How am I going to find the time?
I believe in eating my own dog food, so this is something that I do on a regular basis. And so it really is about basically, so there are a couple of things that we can do, tricks that we can do in your business that will help free up your time. And the key is you can't replace it with other stuff that's not gonna, lead to this understanding your customer. So there are tips and tricks that we can implement: managing waste and variability, bottleneck management, things like that. There's a lot. But once we free up that time, you have to actually take that time to go and talk with your customer. And it's that empathetic conversation, and you have to set aside like 60 minutes for that conversation. And you have to be very careful that the conversation isn't, tell me about the day you decided to buy my product, because that's the wrong question. If you're asking for them to tell you about the day that they decided to buy your product, then you're not going to get the insight into the job. You're going to get the insight into the trade-offs that they were making to decide why your product or service was better than your competition's. But if you understand what the job is, you may come to realize that your competition isn't actually like your direct competition. So I'll give you an example with me. As I was talking with my customers, I came to realize my competition isn't necessarily other consultants. That's like direct competition, but my competition is actually business books, YouTube, Google. My real big competitor is just dissolving the business. Just throwing up their hands and saying, okay, I'm done. I cannot work. I cannot have another vacation where I work 20 hours on this vacation, over a week. Like I have to free myself from this. So like taking the time to have that conversation, again, where I'm saying, tell me about this time when you felt the pain of this problem so intensely that you decided to make a change. That gives you the insight that you need. And then obviously you need to unpack vague words like, well, my computer wasn't fast. Well, I need you to actually give me some value there. So it's like faster than what? Slower than what? Provide context into what's going on. There's a really great book that kind of dives into this a little bit further called Demand Side Sales 101. And chapter 4 in that book is a really great explanation into how to carry out these interviews that you're going to be having with your customer to understand the job. But I walk my customers through that, and a lot of times I've actually got an offer where I will do that for them so that they can, because I don't have skin in that game, so I can actually get these questions out there without having the emotional connection that they might have. Like I can distance myself from that more and get more clarity on that.
So how would this translate to a strictly service-based business? Would it be the same process? So I'm thinking we have a lot of listeners in our audience who might be therapists or practice owners. And so we are very comfortable sitting with clients and their pain and their struggle. But we did recently send out a client satisfaction survey, and it didn't really have the desired effect. We got a lot of feedback, but it wasn't necessarily helpful in terms of what can we do differently. It was a lot of, I feel like I got matched with the right therapist, I've had a great experience. There weren't a lot of valuable takeaways from that, and it sounds like you probably would have predicted that. How would you incorporate this with someone who's service-based rather than product-based?
So the thing that I love about jobs theory is that it's very, very versatile. You can apply jobs theory to why someone voted for one politician over another politician. You can why they chose to go with that religion over this religion. Like it's a very adaptable concept. And so it works perfectly for service-based businesses. In fact, I only work with service-based businesses because service-based businesses often need the most help when it comes to their operations. Like there's a lot of literature about how to make your assembly line work better. There's a lot. Like we've got 100 years worth of excellent literature on making manufacturing better. We have very little on applying those concepts to a service-based business. And so that's what I do. So, we're talking about applying jobs in a service context. Like I said, I eat my own dog food. So the job that my customers are hiring me to do is to help them basically set their team up for success so that they can continue to grow the business while also taking the burden of the business off their shoulders. And this is language that I'm constantly refining and tweaking because I'm constantly talking to these people who are my clients, could be my clients, were clients of my competition, so that I can understand what is the job that they were hiring that consultant to do. So in a therapy business, right, you're saying one day the emotional pain that you were experiencing was so severe. There was an event that happened. There was a something that happened that led you to decide, I have to make a change. And at that moment, you started this journey. And this journey took you from passive looking to ongoing use with steps in between that helped you to make a decision about who you were going to go with and all of that stuff. I need to understand that journey, but first and foremost, I need to understand that experience that happened. So for me, I had a really interesting realization as I've been doing these conversations, which is the businesses that I work with, a lot of times they'll have this, that we call it a first thought. They'll have this first thought within a week of a family vacation. One person that I talked to, she was on a cruise ship and she was at the very front of the ship. And there was an old Asian couple that came up to her, and it was an extended cruise. And they said, you work a lot. We see you up here every day on the front of the ship. And she said, well, I'm up here because I get best reception. But yeah, I really do work a lot. And so she decided, I'm just going to roll up my business. And that's exactly what she did. She rolled up her business and gave all of her clients to her employee and just walked away.
Okay.
Another guy that I talked to, he said, I had just done an extended 4-week vacation with my family, and it was the following Friday evening. I was sitting at home in front of my computer because I had more work to do, and I realized I'm going to spend my entire weekend working. I need to get out of this. Something's got to change. Either my business changes or I do. Something's going to have to give here. And so your customer, your client, your patient, it's going to be different. They're going to have a job. They're going to have a story. But that story's probably going to, as you interview more and more people, you're going to find a common thread.
Okay.
You're going to understand what that story is. And then you're going to see, okay, so they were here and then they wanted to go here. So if I build this bridge that's going to take them from there to here, then I will be able to solve their problem, and I can sell that as a service.
I see. So this is getting my gears turning as far as supplements to therapy, but I think ultimately with therapy, different therapists have different modalities that they use, different specialties. They've been trained to utilize different techniques, and so that's the piece that I see being challenging, where client may necessarily seek out a particular clinician because they specialize in a certain area, but you're making me think of maybe something that could supplement the therapy, and that might be something that would come out of these conversations potentially.
Partially.
I don't know if there's more that you can say about that.
Absolutely. Partially that supplemental material. So that's what's called a sustaining innovation. So there are fundamentally 3 types of innovation. Disruptive innovation, which is where you take an existing technology and you apply it to serve an underserved market in new ways. You build a new market, basically.
Okay.
Then you've got efficiency innovation, which is I need to find a way to do what I'm already doing operationally more profitably and more efficiently. The third type is sustaining innovation. And sustaining innovation is I need to find a way to grow or maintain my market share in an existing market. And the way that you do that is you're going to tweak your offering so that it does something better than the competition, right? If you understand the job, then sustaining innovation becomes really, really easy because it's, my client came to me because they have this problem. And they felt like this modality served that problem better than that because they did this research, they looked up this website, they did this or that, right? They listened to this podcast. So they felt like this modality would be better. So then what do I need to do to help them go from here to there better? And that's where that supplemental comes in. But it also is where, the offerings that you're able to do even in your sessions can improve.
Definitely. I'm noticing a theme here today. So prior to this interview with you, I'm part of this faith-based practice owner community. And the topic of our conversation today was client retention. And it was run by someone who is a private pay practice owner, and we're insurance-based. And we were talking about some of the differences between those who choose to utilize their insurance benefit versus pay out of pocket for therapy. And do we find that there's a difference in terms of the client's approach to therapy, how long they're in therapy for, when they start to experience results? And so it sounds like what you're really ultimately getting at, are there opportunities for supplemental services? Yes, but if you really get down to it, it's when you're comparing yourself to the competition, how can you ultimately alleviate some of that suffering and help your clients to achieve that higher level of functioning in a more efficient time frame, rather than those individuals that may ultimately utilize therapy for a longer period of time because they're looking for that support or some sort of validation. It's more results driven potentially than more of that supportive model. Does that sound accurate?
Kind of. I would add a tweak where it's like, if your clients are coming to you and they're hiring you because they want to hire you for like 10 years and just work with that, then yeah, like that's the job that they're hiring you to do, is to be their emotional support therapist for 10 years. Like, totally cool. Let's design your strategy and your operations around that. You know, maybe instead of having one session a week and more clients, you can do fewer clients, more sessions. You're still making the same amount of money. You're just working with fewer people, and you're really just doing empathetic listening because they don't want to work through their problems, right? But if you have clients who are saying, no, I really need to get this done. I know it's all self-pay. I can only afford one session with you, so we got to get some stuff happening today. Then it's like, okay, we need to change maybe our structure a little bit, and maybe we can offer a payment plan, or maybe we can change how we're doing our operations so that it's like we have a little bit of flexibility there.
Sure.
There's all sorts of things that you can do, but it all comes back to, what does your client need and what are they asking for, and what do you have the ability to deliver on?
Sure. Because it's ultimately not a one-size-fits-all. So having these conversations with people, you'll be more inclined to get that clarity at the outset and then proceed accordingly. Which makes sense.
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. And I know that it's like drinking from a fire hose here. I promise, like, I get it. But I had a mentor, he said, when you share concepts, people either get it or they don't. Clayton Christensen, he said that theories aren't about teaching you what to think, they're rather about teaching you how to think. Sure. And when you know how to think, then you can respond appropriately. And so the whole purpose of this was to help you understand, like, this is how you should be thinking about your operations in your business so that you can get the outcome that you want.
Well, and that ultimately your clients want.
Exactly. You got it.
Ding, ding, ding. So that was great. You definitely have the gears turning for sure, and I can see this being really valuable for those listening in any business. So what would you say is one final takeaway that you would want people to still be thinking about when they're no longer listening?
So, one thing that I want them to think about in terms of a takeaway is, what are the next steps to them getting in front of their client and doing these conversations? Or who is the client that they should be talking to? What do they look like? Those are two really important questions. If you can't answer who that client is, answer that one first. If you can, then the next question is, okay, how do I get in front of them so that I can ask these questions? And then obviously the third question is, how can I hire Zac to completely revolutionize my business?
So in addition to working with you and having you provide, I'm sure, that framework of questions, do you have resources for people on how they can structure those empathetic conversations to really get to the heart of what's going on there and what people are looking for as far as results?
So I am actively working on developing more resources. Right now, the resources that I recommend people go to, there are two books. The first book is called Competing Against Luck by Clayton Christensen. It's where he really rolls out this concept of jobs theory, and it's excellent. You can get it on Audible, super easy read or listen. The next one is Demand Side Sales 101, which is really, to me, a masterclass in how you do these interviews. so that you can understand, like, what is it that my customer is actually hiring me to do? What's that progress?
Okay.
You know, I hope to, by the end of the year, have some really solid resources in place, maybe a book that people will be able to use to really get more information there.
Awesome. Well, I will stay tuned. So what is the best way for people to follow you, work with you, learn more about you?
So I recommend people go to businesslegendconsulting.com. They can sign up for my email newsletter there. They can, if they want to schedule a conversation with me, they can schedule a conversation with me there. There is my social media. I'm on all the Twitters. So Homeric Consulting, if you just search for Homeric Consulting on Twitter, LinkedIn, or Facebook or YouTube, I should pull up.
Okay. Well, you definitely delivered today. I'm glad that I buckled up. Thank you so much for the work that you do and for keeping things very customer centered and for sharing some tips and valuable takeaways as well as resources. And we'll stay tuned for that book. I'm going to hold you to it.
Oh, you got it.
Take care. If you like what you're hearing, please rate and review. This will help others find us and benefit as well. The Compassionate Climb podcast represents the opinions of Julia Napini and her guests. The information provided is intended for educational purposes only and should not be taken as legal advice. If that is what you are seeking, please consult an attorney.